Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood from YouTube, here to do another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. This is episode 132. This episode was written by, Ron Sproat and directed by John Sedgwick. So this starts off in David's room. Actually, this episode takes place from the previous night when Laura came to the house and left. David came down from the stairs, and they had to grab him because he went out the door hollering for his mother. Now he's back up in his room, and Elizabeth is talking to him, and he had a bad dream. Elizabeth says it was just a bad dream, reassuring him everything's okay. It's a very quick conversation. He lays down, she covers him up, and she leaves the house, leaves the room, I should say. And as soon as she leaves, David gets up from his bed and opens the window and says, "Mother, mother." So he's hollering for his mother out the window. The following morning, there at breakfast, you you see a close up of Lewis Edmonds as Roger Collins. So at this table, it's Roger, it's David Collins, it's Elizabeth uh, Collins Stoddard, it's Victoria Winters. Um, they're eating eggs. Roger wants David to stop playing with his food to eat some eggs. He says, "I don't like the eggs; they're very runny, and well, at least eat your food." And Roger takes a bite of the eggs, and David Collins here looks at Elizabeth, says, "Do I have to eat the eggs? Eat what you can," which infuriates Roger. He kind of slams his utensils on his fork, like, really, really, I'm his dad. Uh, Kind of overruling Roger in a bit, undermining what Roger says. And he eats one bite of eggs, same as his dad, and says, That's all I can eat." And Vicky says, "Well, if that's all you can eat, let's go up and do your math. I'm going to teach, you know." And she does tell him, "I'm going to teach long division if it kills me." And he says, "It'll probably kill me." But before that, he does try to say, Aunt Elizabeth, do I have to do the math?" And she says, "Yes, you have to do your math." And they both leave uh, together to go up to David's room. And this is where the conversation between Roger and Elizabeth start. And Roger gets up to get more coffee. Liz asks him if she wants him to get it, and he says no. And as he does, she goes, "Elizabeth, I really wish you wouldn't undermine me in front of my son, or at least in front of David." Um, and there's a very interesting conversation here that he feels Elizabeth uh, doesn't want, because Elizabeth is giving off that vibe that Elizabeth doesn't want David to go with Laura, David's mother. Mother. Uh, sorry. Um, and Elizabeth says, "Well, he's a Collins," and Roger says, "I know. He's the heir apparent. He's the only Collins male. Well, is it wrong that I want to teach him to be a Collins?" And Roger says, "No, it's not. I didn't say that it was." It's a very, not just a brother sister conversation. It's a father uh, versus aunt conversation. And when Elizabeth's foot goes down, everybody's mouth goes shut, pretty much. Roger, not so much here. Roger's kind of challenging her a bit to a degree, which I do like because, like, he's saying, "Hey, David's my son. Laura has every right to see her." Uh, in a lot of this episode, and when we go up to back up to see David uh, later here after this discussion happens, because they walk. Roger walks around the kitchen holding the coffee cup. Elizabeth is like insistent that David. She doesn't feel Laura should see David. And up in the room, David and Victoria are doing math. But they're also having a conversation. And David asks Victoria Winters, "Do you? I'm surprised you don't hate me." And she goes, "That's an interesting thing for you to say." And David, I don't hate you. You're not mad at me. She goes, "No, you told Burke." Well, I tried telling my dad. Well, that's all. That's all behind us. It's all good. And you also, David says, it's just so frustrating sometimes because I have no one to talk to. She goes, "Well, I understand how you feel, because he says, I don't think you understand how much." He goes, "Oh no, I do. You're meaning no one to talk to as an adult. Well, you mean your mom and dad, and your dad. You've never been able." Victoria doesn't necessarily say this, but she's getting the sense of, okay, David has never been able to talk to Roger really, and mom's not been around. Uh, Liz, where Liz had brought up about the sanitarium, her state of mind, and Roger insists she looked fine last night, and she did. That conversation happens here too. But Miss Winters in here says to David, "I understand how you feel. I didn't have a mom and dad to talk to. I grew up in an orphanage, as you know." Uh, so very good conversation. And he asked Miss Winters, he goes, you still want your mom to come back to find you?" She goes, "Yes, of course." And he goes, "That's just it. I I used to want my mom to come, and see me or to come and take me away. I don't think I want that anymore." And or at least he's not sure. So David is on the surface very, very curious here and very afraid, it seems like. And he, Victoria Winters is commenting on how pale he looks. And he goes, "Yeah, I feel very tired. I didn't get much sleep last night. Kai lay down." Kai finished. She goes, "Of course you can." David also says to Vicky, "You're a lot nicer um, than I thought you were when you first came here." Thank you, David. Which is nice for him to say. So David lays down and Vicky covers him up. And when Vicky goes downstairs, David gets out of his bed and looks out the window and says, "Mother, and are you out there?" And we cut downstairs. Elizabeth is in the drawing room. She looks like she's doing a ledger. Roger walks in with gloves on. He's holding firewood. He sits it by the fireplace, takes off the gloves, and he says to Elizabeth, you always, positioned yourself as a fair woman. I don't think you're being very fair to Laura." And she goes, "That's nonsense. I'm not being unfair to her." And she goes, "You never liked Laura." "No, but I'm not a snob. You used to give those speeches how she was such a gold digger. And considering who you married, bringing up Paul without mentioning his name." I love this discussion. And she goes, "That's the past. Let's focus on the future." He goes, "Okay, let's focus on the here and the now." And he does say, "Well, Laura's going to come back. Maybe she'll come back today. Are you going to completely avoid David not knowing his mother's here?" She goes, "No, I have every intention of letting him know before she comes back here. I'm not trying to necessarily keep, I'm not trying to keep from David knowing that his mother's here. I wouldn't do that to the boy, you know." And she says that you also get the sense is Elizabeth is very protective of David. She always has been. Uh, and Victoria comes in on this conversation. She says, uh, David is very scared. His dream last night, and he seems very tired, very, very pale. Um, and that's when Roger says, "Go get David. We want to talk to him." Uh, Considering Laura is back, and she goes, "Laura, isn't that your?" "Yes, that's my wife. That's David. It's David's mother." He doesn't say David's mother, but Vicky knows the name. She's heard the name. And by the way, this is Victoria Winter's episode back, really, from being abducted. I mean, because they hadn't had her here in at least a couple of what, two episodes, one episode. So she hasn't been in an episode here or two, and here's just now. I like how the shock factor. She's just now hearing about Laura, and why not? So Vicky says that's an awful coincidence, and Elizabeth says what? Well, that's what his dream about was his mother, and he's very scared. Roger feels this is all mountain out of molehill stuff. He finds some of it curious. The next thing he's going to find real curious. So they ask Vicky to go get David, and she does, but she looks back at them like, I don't know if this is a good idea. But she follows orders. She goes up to get David. David is at the window. Mother, mother. You hear mother four times. Vicky walks in. Were you talking to somebody? She goes, no. She goes, you got to go downstairs. Your father and your Aunt Elizabeth want to talk to you. I know what they want. Better get it over with. Get what over with? Oh, nothing. And as David's leaving the room, we see Vicky close the window. They go back downstairs, and David sits down. And this is the creepy part. If you thought David was creepy before, what are you gonna load of this? David says, just tell me, just get it over with. Tell you what, get what over with. My mother's here, isn't she? Um, yes. How did you know that? I dreamt about her. So David has said about him dreaming about his mother, and she was calling to me. She was wearing a blue coat. I mean, she describes what his mother was wearing last night. He describes his mother, where his mother was sitting, which is all accurate without seeing it. And Roger and Elizabeth are in shock by this. It's one thing for David to eavesdrop. David was in bed, and they both know it. And he says, "All right, I know everything there is to know. Can I go now?" Yes, you can go. And he just goes. He's very he doesn't seem enthused about his mother being here. He doesn't, you know, there's almost no reaction to his mother being back. Whereas remember before he wanted his mother back. And they talk about that in this episode. Elizabeth and Roger do a very great interaction. And once David leaves, they begin talking again about, you know, how shocked that was. I mean, he described everything, and Roger says, "Yeah, it is puzzling. He could have just been here, right? He could have just been spying." And Elizabeth says, "No, you know as well as I do. He was up in his bed." And so it's very puzzling to Liz and Roger what's going on with David. And David in his room by his window, "Mother, are you out there? Mother, are you out there?" And that is the end of this episode. Very, very tense David, a very terrified David, but also curious of why his mother's back a little bit, but more so terrified. There's something about David in this episode that he's on the fence about his mom being back, very much so. Just great interaction by the cast. It's so fun. Link to this episode is going to be in the description box. I hope you guys have a pleasant evening.